Well, welcome everyone. I'm Phil Klissa with the Wisconsin Board for People with Developmental Disabilities and one of the project managers for the Supported Decision-Making projects. I have a whole panel of people that we're going to introduce in a little bit, but first we're going to do a little housekeeping. If you have requested sign language interpretation, we have two interpreters here. We have Gail Partridge, who is assigning right now, and Donna Brandwin, who will be supporting her and taking over at different times. So if you need sign language interpreter, you can pin them to your screen. We also have Spanish interpreters. If you need Spanish translation, you can go down to your toolbar and look for the little globe. And if you click on the globe, you will see both English and Spanish available, and you can select the language that you would like to receive this information in. We are offering continuing education credits provided by UW-Stevens Point. At the end of this webinar, we will be providing them with names and emails of everyone who attended, and you should be getting an email from them in about 7 to 10 business days telling you about the next step that you need to take if you would like to get those continuing education credits. Also at the end of this webinar, we will have a survey for you to fill out. We would very much appreciate it if you provide us with some feedback so that we can continue to improve our presentation and continue to offer presentations like this in the future. So please do click the link and complete that survey. And so now we're going to start off with Tammy Jackson, who is one of my colleagues, and I'll let Tammy introduce herself, and she can start us off with some nuts and bolts about supported decision making.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tammy, and I am the Legislative Liaison and Public Policy Person for the Wisconsin Board for People with Developmental Disabilities, and also one of the lead folks that helped shepherd the supported decision-making legislation into law in 2018. Disability and aging advocates work collectively on that legislation and have now we have another tool in our toolbox for folks who maybe would like some support making decisions. And today I'm going to share my screen in a moment, and we're going to talk about supported decision making and some of the other options that folks have if they need help making decisions. Okay. So for those of you who are professionals, yes, this presentation is also for you, but I'm going to be talking about it from the context and the perspective of people with disabilities and their families. And verbally, we will kind of talk about professionals as a group as well, but we really want to make sure that we are talking about the idea of who makes decisions and why that's important from the perspective of the person with a disability and people who are engaged in supporting them in their lives. Oftentimes when we do this presentation, it is more to family members who have young adults, often people with IDD, but not exclusively, who are transitioning into adulthood. And there's a lot going on in that period of time. For all of us, this is not disability specific. Turning 18 is a big deal. And for families with kids with disabilities, they're often being asked to do many, many things that are pretty significant decisions in a very short span of time. So this presentation often is hitting families when they have many other things on their plate and they're trying to figure out a very important piece of their future, which is, oh, how do I support my individual as they are an adult and in making their own decisions and growing and learning throughout their lifespan? What are my options to do that? I always ground ourselves in what Wisconsin law is for all of us. Wisconsin has decided that 18 is the age at which you become an adult. There's nothing magical about the number 18. It's just a number. It's a fine number. And that's the line in the sand where if you're over age 18, Wisconsin law says, okay, you're an adult, and we presume that you can make your own decisions about your life. The reality is age 18 is not an on-off switch. People have been making decisions throughout their lives up to age 18. So I like to think of age 18 as an on-ramp, that you are now fully able to make the array of decisions that all other adults can make. And a lot of times there's fear when it comes to age 18 that once somebody's an adult, they're going to start making damaging decisions or decisions that they shouldn't be making. And a lot of times we don't think about that if the person doesn't have a disability, but it's a real fear that we often hear in these presentations. So I also like to emphasize that decision making is a learned skill. Some of us who are older than 18, and I am in that group, have made a lot of decisions in our lives. Some of them are better than others, and some decisions weren't great. But decision making is a learned skill, and it happens across our entire lifespan. We're always capable of learning new things and doing new experiences. And when we talk about age 18, everybody has already been practicing making decisions. Some people have more or less practice than others. Nobody has experience with making every single kind of decision that there is, because no one can. So a lot of times people forget that once you've become an adult, it's not that you've never had to make decisions before. And it's not that you have everything you need in your toolbox to make every decision that comes your way throughout a lifetime. You just have the legal ability to do those things. And everyone needs experience to make well-formed decisions, including people with disabilities and including people without disabilities. What we do know is that people who feel in control of their own lives, who are making decisions, whether or not those decisions turn out to be good ideas or not great ideas or bad ideas, if you make your own decisions, we know that these folks tend to be more satisfied and happier with their lives. And they also tend to be more independent. And because they've been exposed to lots of different decision making and probably exposed to lots of different experiences, they're also better able to recognize when something isn't right, which is a critical skill in itself. So we do have research that the more self-determination you have, which is the fancy phrase we use to say, can I make my own decisions about things that are important to me in my life? If the answer to that is yes, you are probably much happier, and there is research to prove that. It's also the thing that we expect for people without disabilities who are 18. Remember, the law presumes that you are competent and that you can make your own decisions. So self-determination is really the default expectation of not only our law, but for people without disabilities. The law presumes everyone is competent if you're over age 18 and you can make your own decisions. That culturally is not the case. for people with disabilities and also older adults. There's a term for it. It's called ableism, ageism, if you are an older adult, that that many people with disabilities have almost universal experience with. And that is, instead of what the law actually says, ableism presumes that because you have a disability, you are less able to make your own decisions. For the professionals in the room, you can see there's a column. You know, the thing that cultural bias is something that is always present, and people may not know that they are reinforcing those biases. A lot of our policies, for example, are in place and actually reinforce this idea that somehow the presence of a disability indicates some lack of ability with decision making. And a lot of times the way that this comes through to the person with a disability is a process or a system really wanting to find a person to make a decision that is not the person with a disability that the decision is about. So when I work through this slide, a lot of families start nodding because they have had the experiences in the families column. They have been the person that the professional turns to when, after they've asked a question and been expected to answer on behalf or for the person with the disability. They have experienced somebody saying to them, "Oh, well, Johnny will never get married, so this doesn't apply," or making other statements that you would never presume to be the default or true if the person didn't have a disability. And I think the piece that most families talk about almost universally is that there is intense pressure, especially in systems that have limited time or expect a decision to be made on the spot. For people who might need a little time to process, which also can be people without disabilities, by the way, if they need a moment, there are lots of systems that don't build in that time. And sometimes many systems are looking to solve their administrative or their time problems by trying to find somebody who is the fastest decider. That is very different than actually being oriented around the needs or the requirements of the person with the disability who should be deciding, because that's whose life it's about. So I think as you think through how has ableism manifested in your life, some of these things may be familiar, either as a person that has had this happen to you, or as a person who may have felt the pressure to move somebody through a process and started advocating or trying to find somebody to make a decision that helps you do that as quickly as possible. So why is that important? Well, cultural bias doesn't happen it's not happening within a vacuum. It is actively teaching people with disabilities and their families the message that is very counter to what the law actually says. And what does it mean if you're being taught that that other people automatically don't think you have the ability to make your own decisions because you have a disability? I'm not going to read the list to you that's on this screen, but I will say that all of the things on here I find to be profoundly negative. That if I had internalized and believed, because of my lived experience, that any or all of these things were true, I think that my mental health would not be very high. I think that there would be a lot of things that maybe I didn't like in my life that I would feel like I wouldn't be able to change. And that could include abuse or neglect or where I want to live or not having, the normal things that other people of my age group would expect to have. So it is serious when we don't orient ourselves around people with disabilities or have the same expectation to make decisions around their own life as everyone else. There are consequences and active harm that comes when we allow ableism to be unchallenged, and when, frankly, we expect families and people with disabilities themselves to do all the heavy lifting and challenge the rest of us when we're kind of not behaving our best. The other thing I often like to validate for families, but also remind professionals is, especially for young people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, age 18, lots of things are happening, consequential things that will really impact, that person, how that person's life, sometimes for the lifetime. And it's just a reminder for folks who are engaging with families or who are professionals, you aren't the only thing in town. You are not the only thing that is happening and not the only thing that is important. And if you think about how much paperwork, for example, or administrative work happens for each of these different aspects of somebody's life, you can see that families can quickly get overwhelmed with lots of things to do, and they go into crisis decision mode, which is, how do I complete this wall of stuff that needs to happen? And that isn't how anybody makes good decisions in crisis mode. Unfortunately, a lot of the families we work with have a lot of experience with making decisions in crisis mode by the time their person is approaching transition age, but it doesn't make it any easier, and it doesn't make it a great way to make decisions. And in this mess of things happening, often the discussion about guardianship comes up. And it's frequently portrayed as an administrative thing that kind of gets tucked into all of the other administrative things, and it isn't. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about today. We're going to spend some time on this slide. I want to orient you to the arrow on the bottom of the slide, and it says less limiting, kind of towards the green edge, and then more limiting towards the purple. What we're talking about limiting on that scale is your civil legal rights to make your own decisions. That presumption in Wisconsin law that if you're over 18, you can make your own decisions, that holds unless you've been gone to court and somebody's found you legally incompetent and those rights to make your own decisions are taken away. That is what we're talking about on the scale here is, are we using tools that don't have limits on the person's civil rights or have some impact on how and when that person exercises their rights to make decisions about themselves? Or on the other side, we've actually taken away somebody's legal rights to make their own decisions. Okay, so we're going to start on the green edge. Many of us are familiar with release forms. They're kind of used all over. We don't even think about them, but they're an important tool because they allow people to acknowledge, yes, I'm giving permission to somebody else, often to see information, or maybe to attend a meeting, or maybe to engage with that entity. They're used all the time, and it's a protection for the provider, really, to have you sign a release form that you acknowledge this other individual is part of the interaction that they're having with you. So it really is not about the person. It is about the provider documenting that someone else that is different than the person is interacting with them in a way that you approve of. But it's still an important thing that you can do, especially if somebody really needs support on understanding information or reading information, or maybe needs some help with coordinating appointments or going through administrative processes that aren't always clear. Release forms can be a really helpful tool for families to have access and provide support to the person, and nobody's losing their civil rights when you sign a release form. It is not in any way remove a person's ability to make their own decisions. It just lets somebody else in through the door to be present and to help them understand. So important tool. The next column is what we'll spend the back half of this presentation talking about, which is supported decision-making agreements. Wisconsin's in parentheses here because about half the states now have some version of a supported decision-making statute. Much like power of attorney and guardianship statutes, those statutes look different depending on the state. But the unifying thing about supported decision-making agreements is, again, they don't take away the individual's civil rights to make their own decisions. They do allow that person to have their own supported decision-making agreement and select somebody. In Wisconsin, it's called who's called a supporter, to fulfill a specific role for them and to help them, support them in understanding information, the decisions, the pros and cons of different options, and communicating their decisions to others, all without them losing their civil rights. Supported decision-making agreements, the individual is always in charge of their own decisions and never loses their civil rights, but they can ask for help without doing, and they can ask for help from supporters without doing that. Moving to conservatorship. Conservatorship is an option that can be very useful. For some people, money management is a challenge they need support with, and any individual can voluntarily say to the court, hey, I would like somebody, and they pick the person. So again, you're voluntarily approaching the court and you're saying, this is the person I would like to manage their finances and property. Again, part of their decision of that part of their life that is financial, the court has said, okay, you're voluntarily saying you need this, and you're telling me this is the person you want me to do that. The conservator manages that person's finances. They're not losing their legal rights, and they can adjust this conservatorship at any time. They can go back to the court and say, I no longer need this, or I would like somebody else, and that is perfectly acceptable. So for folks who really need assistance with money management, this is an option. And again, they're making the decision about wanting somebody to do that function for them and choosing who it is. So they're in the driver's seat on that decision making. And it can be an important tool. Again, if money management is the challenge the person has. Moving towards the red column, powers of attorney. In this state, we have two kinds: powers of attorney for healthcare and finances. Those are two different forms, two different documents. And again, they can be written in different ways, but it is the person themselves who is choosing who would be the person that they would want to make medical decisions or financial decisions on their behalf if they cannot. So again, it's the person that is choosing who would do that role. And a power of attorney many times is written in a way where it is triggered. In other words, it isn't active all the time. It's only active when the person loses their capacity to make their own decisions. I often use the example of medical power of attorneys because lots of times, like, people understand that if you are unconscious, for example, you might not be able to make your own medical decisions. That is a situation where if you had a medical power of attorney and your medical team says, yes, you meet the criteria for being medically incapacitated, that power of attorney would be triggered. And the person that you've designated on that form, the agent, that's what they're called, would be making your medical decisions until you regained your medical capacity. Okay, so it really is an on-off trigger many times. And sometimes you can write them differently. You can financial powers of attorney are also can be written so that they are durable. So if you need help managing your finances and you have a power of attorney, you can write it in a way where that power of attorney is triggered when you have when you don't have capacity, and that financial power of attorney would have probably the ability to do things like pay your bills and other things. Or you could write it in a way where that power of attorney is always activated, durable. And then you have another person who is always able to access your money and pay your bills or your rent or other things. So there's some flexibility here in two major areas of decision making that many people end up needing some support with, either healthcare or finances. And again, the person themselves is in charge of picking who they want to be in that role to make those kinds of decisions if need be. Now, it's a little more on the more limiting side, only because when you are incapacitated, when those powers of attorney are activated, you are not exercising, somebody else is exercising your rights for you. And when you regain your capacity, you haven't lost your rights, but somebody else has been acting on them while you were out, so to speak. So, in that moment when you don't have capacity, someone else is making consequential decisions on your behalf. Moving along to the second blue column, many folks, either older adults or people with disabilities, engage with the Social Security Administration. And again, if financial management is a challenge for you, then you can designate somebody as what's called the representative payee. And that representative payee becomes the person who directly receives that cash benefit check and pays the bills and other manages those Social Security funds. That's important for a lot of people with disabilities and older adults. Social Security as a source of income might be the main source of income. And having a rep payee managing that money essentially means that they have access and control over almost that whole person's income. So it is something where the person hasn't lost their civil legal rights to make their own decisions, but they do not have the same access to their finances as somebody who does not have a representative payee. And so you can see that can be a very useful function. And it can also be an opportunity for somebody who's less scrupulous to control the access to the money that person has. So again, you haven't lost your rights, but you don't have the same access to what might be the major source of income for the individual. Now I'm going to pause here and just say that all of the things that we just talked about, rep payee, powers of attorney of healthcare and finances, supported decision-making agreements, release forms, even a conservatorship. All of these tools can be used in combination with each other. They're not mutually exclusive. There are many people who use release forms, who have a power of attorney for healthcare, or a rep and a rep payee, and have supported decision-making agreements. These are this is tools in the wider toolbox that you can use together in any combination to provide support for the person. There are a lot of tools that help with finances. Rep payee, power of attorney for finance, conservatorship. You can even use supported decision makings in that way. There's healthcare, release forms, and power of attorney for healthcare, and sometimes supported decision making agreements can all be useful tools. And there are many, many other decisions in life that are not healthcare or finances. And many people use supported decision making agreements and release forms for those. So everything we've talked about, you can use simultaneously and, in any certain combination. Now we're going to move to the purple piece, because this is the one thing that does limit somebody's civil legal rights. And that does mean that some of these other tools no longer become options for you. So guardianship is a court proceeding, and you are petitioning the court to evaluate whether somebody is legally competent to make some or all of their decisions. And the petitioner is never the person with a disability who might be subject to the guardianship. It's always a person external to the individual who would be subject to guardianship, and generally the person who is petitioning to become the guardian. The petitioner is approaching the court and they are saying, I don't think that this person is legally capable of making their own decisions. I've filled out a form. These are the certain areas of rights that I want you to evaluate, and I want you to take away their civil legal rights to make their own decisions and assign them to me as a guardian. That is what guardianship is. We do have limited guardianship in this state, and it's really a matter of degree. It's how many of the civil rights are you taking away from the individual? And when I say civil rights, I mean things like the right to vote, the right to hunt and fish, the right to determine where you live, the right to determine your own healthcare decisions, things like whether or not somebody can legally be married. These are the kinds of rights that a court may be evaluating when they are considering whether somebody should be under a guardianship. Once the court decides that the person isn't legally competent, they lose their rights, and those rights to make those kinds of decisions are transferred to a guardian. This is the court, from that point on, is always in charge. They are in charge of overseeing the conduct of the guardian. They are in charge if the guardian that's been appointed needs to be reappointed or changed. They will pick the next guardian. You as the guardian might be able to say, here is a successor or somebody I would like to fill in my stead. But the reality is the court is always going to be the final decider. And it's very hard once a guardianship is in place to reverse it or to change it. So for many people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, this purple column is where the conversation starts for them. So the most restrictive option is the default conversation starter when it comes to how are you going to think about decision making for this person. And oftentimes a guardianship is put in place at maybe even before age 18, 17 and a half, and it is a lifetime. And there's very little thought or real evaluation about that again, we talked about ableism and, you know, the idea that for certain people, this should, you know, there's a reason this is the default thought process. It's because it's rooted in the idea that, well, some people with disabilities somehow have less presumed competence to make their own decisions. It isn't true, but it doesn't mean it doesn't work out that way. Guardians, there again are kind of two kinds. A guardian of the estate, think of that as managing money and property, and guardian of the person, which manages all the other decisions. Our guardianship law is fairly comprehensive and it's good. So there are lots of duties and roles that are assigned to each of the guardian of the person and the guardian of the estate. They have separate and distinct duties and powers in the statute. Many times the same individual is appointed at both, but that's not necessarily the case. And there are administrative requirements that both these roles have to comply with. So it's just kind of a frame. I think that we've been doing these trainings for quite some time. I'm not going to read every statement up on the screen, except to say that we have heard every single one of these things multiple times over the years from people just like yourselves. These are colloquially things that people believe, they hear, they're told. It's sometimes convenient to believe these things, and they are all false. Every single one of them. Okay. I think one thing that doesn't get talked about, and I will frame this for us here, is oftentimes when families get talked to about guardianship, they don't get talked to about any of the other tools we discussed that might be helpful to them. They also are really not informed that of what rights they might be petitioning to take away. A lot of times people just fill out the court form and they check all the boxes and they really don't understand what rights they're petitioning the court or asking the court to take away. They also aren't necessarily thinking about this in terms of long-term future planning. And this is important because many people are living longer. That includes people with disabilities and older adult caregivers, including parents. But we aren't all aging at the same capability forever. So, you know, maybe there are some folks in the audience who have already chosen guardianship and maybe that was the right choice. However, that just means that your future planning really does need to continue, because now that there's a guardian in place, you have to start thinking about, well, who's going to be the next individual who's willing to take on the entirety of this role? What does this look like for me 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 40 years from now? What happens as I age and my abilities change? Will there be a point where I can no longer perform the duties of a guardianship? This is all really new territory. It's, you know, guardianship is a perfectly fine tool if nothing ever changes. That's what it's designed to be. It's designed to be, you are not legally competent, and that is not necessarily something that courts expect to revisit. And you know, that guardianship is often in place for decades. So future planning conversations become different once you start thinking about making this decision at a point in time and having to commit to it potentially throughout the lifespan of your individual. Again, it could be the right choice, but very frequently families are not thinking about the full context of their lives or how their lives will end up changing, you know, the longer time goes by. For individuals who are under guardianship, I think it bears saying that many people under guardianship will describe an erosion of their rights, or the guardian starting to creep and make more and more decisions, even if those decisions aren't things that they're really allowed to do under the guardianship order. And people with disabilities often describe a creep towards a creeping of control, essentially, over more and more parts of their lives, and a more and more limited life. So again, I'm not going to read all of these things, but these are all things that we hear very routinely from people who are living under guardianships. Guardians, I like to repeat this piece of the statute, even if that is the route you go, our statute really is quite elegant. Guardian doesn't mean you make somebody else's decision. It is not the role of a parent. It has a separate statutory role. It is not the same as continuing your role of a parent. And your responsibility is to put the least restriction on the person and make sure they are as included as possible, and that their preferences are honored. That beautiful piece of language in the law is often not honored and doesn't materialize in real life, but that is the spirit of the law. And I think that since we've passed supported decision making, we've also passed some guardian training requirements, which have been helpful for guardians to understand, how do I do this if this is the role they've had. But it is important to remember, a guardian, even though culturally our ableism bias presumes that the guardian makes all decisions, that is in fact not true under the law. So supported decision making, it's really rooted in the idea that everybody makes choices, and you can ask for help without giving up your rights to make your own choices, and that really this is a natural part of human experience, asking the wider network of people around you for advice. We all use supported decision making. If you have ever asked your group of friends for advice on something, and I will use the ridiculous example of, I needed to buy an immersion blender at one point, and so I asked my friends, hey, I'm thinking about this. What are the things I should be looking for? I got a wall of advice that was really, really deep, like attachments, what are you going to do? Like I had people who came in and they had opinions on immersion blenders, and it was helpful. I read through what they had and listened to what they had to say, and I made a choice. And I have an immersion blender, and it's wonderful. That is an example of a supported decision making, where you have a decision to make. You ask a group of trusted people in your life who might have something to say about it. They gave you a bunch of information. You make your own decision. That's supported decision making. Why do we need a law for it for people with disabilities? Because culturally we assume that people with disabilities can't do that just like everybody else can. And we're wrong. But that is where we are, that we need a formal tool and an agreement so that people with disabilities can ask for help, and people around them can give that help, and everybody knows that the person with the disability still has the rights to make their own decisions. So not everybody can use supported decision making in Wisconsin. It is broad. Wisconsin does not require you in any way to prove that you belong to one of these groups. We believe you if you say you have a functional impairment, and that you don't need a doctor's note or anything else. If you say you can use a supported decision making agreement, you can. But it really is supposed to be for folks of that have conditions that interfere with the ability to provide self-care or life activities. It can mean people with degenerative diseases. It definitely includes people with intellectual developmental disabilities and mental health conditions and physical disabilities. It was important to the aging community that we did not have a number because things happen to people throughout their lives. So that's why it is intended to also be helpful to older adults. It's just that we don't put a bright line in the sand of when older adult begins, because stuff can happen, over the course of a lifetime that might make this usable for them. Supported decision-making agreements. Nobody loses their civil rights. The person is always the decider. They have the right to make their own decisions. They're always in control of their own decisions. It doesn't give a supporter any new rights. You're not making decisions for the person. You have a very specific role that the person has decided under the agreement, and that is your role. So you don't become a decider or a person who can pressure. Your role is to help that person have enough information to make their own decision. And what are those roles that a supporter can play? Accessing data. For a lot of people, especially if they have hearing loss or other disabilities or vision loss, that makes interacting with like a phone menu or a web interface not always reliable or easy. Accessing information is just a huge support role that you can play. Gathering things that people can use to make their decision is incredibly helpful. As is helping the person understand that information. Not everything is written in plain language. Not everybody is a reader. Not everybody communicates in the same way. So there's a real role for people to be able to help folks understand bureaucraties, so to speak. I don't want to pick on our state agency friends, but sometimes they write letters that I have to read 5 times, and I'm still not clear after I've read them. The other big role supporters can play is to help people understand their options. How many times have you been in a situation where somebody said to you, it's like, okay, so you've got to make this decision. Here's option A, here's option B, here's option C, and here are the pros and cons of each, and then you make your own decision. That's what you're doing for a person with under a supported decision-making agreement who's assigned you that role. And lastly, I underestimated how important this was, but some people only want agreements for this, assisting with communicating that person's decision to others, especially for folks that have non-traditional communication styles or speech impediments or are nonverbal. Many times they are perfectly clear about what they want, but the rest of us don't necessarily understand what they're trying to say. And there can be a valuable role for somebody to essentially do translation services for them. So to make sure that they're understood. So if you're a supporter, there are provisions in the law. You don't get carte blanche access to anything you want. It's really the person's always in control of their own agreement. And so they're deciding what they want help with, and they're deciding how you as a supporter might help them. That doesn't mean you get access to all information about them. And it does not mean that you are not required to keep that personal information confident. Yes, you can have multiple supported decision-making agreements. Makes sense. Many of us have different people in our lives, and very few of us have only one person in our life that we would approach about everything, right? I don't ask the same person for advice on buying a car as doing my taxes. That I don't have one individual who has expertise in both of those things. And that's true for all of us, right? So it really is a way that you can spread out the help and the support across as many people who are willing to help you as possible. And that's extraordinarily beneficial. The person is always in charge of their agreement. We have a toolkit that helps folks have conversations and revisit agreements. Unlike guardianship, we anticipated that these agreements should be flexible. They should breathe. They should change over time, because as people gain experience making their own decisions, they may need more or less support. Or there could be people in their lives that change, and maybe they want somebody different to support them in an area, or maybe the supporter has a moment where they have other things going on in their lives and they can give less support. These are agreements are supposed to be flexible, and they're supposed to be conversations that continue throughout somebody's lifespan. So you can have a specific date by which something ends. You can decide to revisit it and change it at any point. You or the supporter can decide, I don't need or want, or I'm not able to do this at any point. There are some provisions in the law where agreements are automatically revoked, if there's been abuse or neglect or other things. But for the most part, people really have a lot of flexibility in terms of deciding who they want to help and how, and for how long. I think one of the things that's important about supported decision-making agreements is there are a lot of decision areas that aren't about healthcare or finances. All the tools that we talked about in that fancy colored spreadsheet, a lot of them were about finances and healthcare. But there really isn't anything else other than supported decision-making agreements that help with all of the other areas in people's lives that are important. For example, finding housing. That's a big one for lots of older adults and people with disabilities. Managing, service agreements. What is the best arrangement for me for internet service, or 1,000 other things. Supported decision-making agreements can be tailored to account to be about whatever decision area somebody needs help with. It makes them extraordinarily flexible. The form is actually included in the state statute, and it's on the DHS website. There are some standard elements on the form. The pieces that some of this makes a lot of sense, right? Writing the name of the person and the name of the supporter and that sort of thing. All you really need to make an agreement legal is the signature of the supporter and either 2 witnesses over the age of 18 or a notary public. And you've got an agreement that is legal, right? The other elements of the form, first part is the who, right? Whose agreement is it, and who are they asking to help them? And the second part of the form is, what do they want help with? So there is a standard list of things that's on the form. What makes supported decision-making so flexible is the other decisions piece. And you can really write anything down that you need here. And then there are other pieces of the form that where the person selects the role they want the supporter to have. And it can be all 4 of those things that we discussed, or only some of them. Again, a lot of flexibility. The law presumes that if you don't affirmatively say, yes, I want somebody to do this, that the answer is no. So if you don't check yes or no, then the law presumes you don't want the supporter to help with that decision. Oops. I'm only going to cover a couple of these things, but I think one thing I like to emphasize, and it was certainly the case with many older adults, is, supported decision-making agreements really broaden the network of people who can serve as helpers and supporters for your individual person. My friend Janet would often say that, for many of the people she serves older adults. A lot of times, a spouse might have preceded them in death, or there weren't children, or there were children, but they were 5 states away. The people who were closest to her older adults were a lot of times their friends, people they have lived with in the community for many, many years. And those people aren't family, but they are very familiar with that person and have an interaction with with their daily lives that perhaps their family members don't have. So supported decision-making agreements are really a way to have a formal role for people who are not necessarily related. And that's really important. Sometimes people have close, wonderful families who do a lot for each other. Sometimes you're related, but you don't think much alike. And that isn't necessarily somebody who you would turn to for decision-making help. And I think supported decision-making agreements recognize that. They recognize that the wider group and wider community of people that individuals can draw on from support doesn't necessarily need to be related. And what they really need is a formal way to show, hey, here's who I am. I'm here because the person wants me to be here, and here's what I'm supposed to do. And the other thing that I always like to emphasize is that flexibility piece of, a lot of times, I usually am thinking about the lifespan of a person with intellectual and developmental disability from young to old. And there's a lot of growth and regression that can happen, when you're talking about spans of 60 to 80 years. People can change. They can have changes in memory and cognition and changes in experiences. They can need less support at some parts of their life and then need more support in other parts. And a lot of people need a little help for a really long time. Sometimes you can progress to needing somebody else to make decisions for you. You may end up in a guardianship place, but for the 60-year-old person who has beginning signs of dementia, they don't need a guardianship for 20 years. They may need a guardianship when that condition progresses to the point where they no longer have the ability to make their own decisions. And to the degree that a little bit of help for a long time is sufficient, supported decision-making agreements allow you to do that. And again, you can use supported decision-making agreements in conjunction with things like powers of attorney and other tools that can progress and build as people age and their abilities change, either for the better or sometimes in decline. So lots of people have been using supported decision-making agreements. The form is free. It is online. All you have to do is fill it out and get 2 people over age 18 to witness or be signed by a notary public. The power of attorney forms are also online and they are free. We wanted this to be as accessible as possible. You do not necessarily need an attorney to fill out the supported decision-making agreement form. It's on the Department of Health Services website. And we do have a toolkit that some people have found useful. We will be planning on revising that toolkit to make it plainer language, but it's intended to help kind of understand what options are available and also to do some worksheets for families so that you can have these important conversations about what kind of support somebody wants or thinks they need, and how to revisit these documents as their abilities change. I also throw in, Chapter 52, because I know there's lots of people like me who like to read the statutes. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And if there are a few questions, we have a few minutes. And I'm happy to try and answer any questions.
Hi, Tammy. Oh, apologies. We do have quite a few questions. It might be easier for you to pull up the Q&A function
Okay.
and read them off, and just click answer live as you read them.
Okay. Does the power of attorney for healthcare have to be activated? That's my understanding and how it differs from financial. You can write a power of attorney for healthcare in a couple of different ways. Many times, a power of attorney for healthcare is not activated unless it is triggered. In other words, unless the individual meets the conditions where they are medically incapacitated, and then that power of attorney is activated, and the agent takes over medical decision making until they regain capacity. However, you can write a power of attorney for healthcare that is more durable. You have to think through what is the best option for your family, where there is somebody else who is able to basically make medical decisions in conjunction with the individual. Financial powers of attorney, again, they can be written in either way. It is slightly more common for financial powers of attorney to be more durable, but you can also write them as triggered. So again, there's a lot of flexibility in that. Does supported decision making apply in other states? This is a good question. We have 25 states that have some version of supported decision-making law. We have states that have their own versions of powers of attorney and guardianship statutes that vary. I think I have not heard of somebody having a problem with having a supported decision-making agreement from another state honored, but I'm also not clear how often that has been tried, and whether it's been tested in court. So I think that the jury is still out on that. Most people, as long as there is permission from the individual person, it is fairly standard that the person can give you permission to, say, attend a health meeting or other things. Oftentimes, people who are using supported decision-making agreements may have other documentation, like a power of attorney, where that person would be recognized. So I think that for the most part, they probably would be honored. I just can't guarantee it. I get confused when somebody has an active durable POA that says the POA is active. I thought only 2 doctors could. The standard for medical incapacity in chapter 155.02, it is that 2 doctors or a doctor and I think a nurse practitioner evaluate the patient to determine whether or not they can make their own medical decisions. So if you have a power of attorney for healthcare that is triggered by medical capacity, then yes, you do need either 2 doctors or a doctor and another medical professional to evaluate that individual's capacity and determine they can't make their own medical decisions. That's where that comes from. But you can write a power of attorney in a way that where the agent is always able to contribute and make decisions. Sometimes you do want to go to a lawyer if you want to be, you could download the forms for free, but we would never tell you don't consult with a lawyer, especially if you're trying to think through, an array of arrangements and what might work best for you. I should have read the next question. I'm sorry, folks. I'm not quite understanding this question. Okay, so this person is asking, is making a statement that we have heard before. We struggle mostly with healthcare organizations who, when we provide the power of attorney, tell us that a power of attorney is not active and will only be activated at a time of incapacity, and there doesn't seem to be a way to get through to them. Is there something that we can provide them to understand, or information that can be added to the POA? So I'm trying to be polite about this. There are many people who work in the healthcare industry who may or may not understand the nuances of the documents that you hope they would understand. You are correct. and unfortunately, one of the reasons we wanted to pass the guardian training requirements, which also include information about powers of attorney and supported decision making and alternatives to guardianship, is because we recognize that there is a lot of work to do in terms of educating professionals, not only about the differences between these documents, but also that there is a need for them to update them, to understand when they're triggered, to actually read what they say. My only advice is that you keep doing what you're doing, which is, explaining, no, this is what it says. This is what it means. It is up to the healthcare industry to understand that what these important documents mean to the patients that they are treating. And I wish I could tell you that I had not heard this before, but you are not alone. And there are certainly some reports of people that need to update a power of attorney for whatever reason, where the hospital has been resistant to, updating the record to reflect the new power of attorney. That is not a you problem. That is a them problem that unfortunately all of us need to keep putting some pressure on. Okay, here's a person who's asking about what happens when a person who's under guardianship is asking for more of their rights back, but the guardian isn't willing to give them that. I will answer this in two ways. First of all, as an advocate, if you see that something is really not right, that you feel like there's a guardian who's exceeding their authority that the court has given to them, you may always call Disability Rights Wisconsin, who is the state protection and advocacy organization for people with disabilities and mental health issues, to populations who are frequently disproportionately impacted by guardianship. They do take a lot of cases where the guardian isn't necessarily violating. The guardian is violating the spirit of the law and exceeding the authority that they've been granted under their guardianship order. And sometimes they can work with that individual or take on a case and go to court if necessary to help that person change the terms of their guardianship. Oftentimes they will want to speak to the person who is under guardianship themselves, but that is one avenue that you always have. The second piece is that our guardianship law does actually have a lot of extensive process on restoration of rights. And it does allow the individual who's under guardianship to petition for their rights back. So frequently what we find is that many people don't know that. And of course, if you're the person with a disability who's under guardianship, you may have lots of barriers to approaching the court yourself, especially if things like phone or is restricted, or access to transportation or other things. But there can be a supporting role that providers and advocates can play in that person's life to help them gain access to the court process where they can advocate for the restoration of their own rights. So I said that oftentimes guardianship is permanent. That is true. And it is because oftentimes because people can't get back into the process and effectively advocate and restore their rights back. But there is a pathway to do it in the statute. What is the best course of action if a medical provider refuses to acknowledge the supported decision-making agreement and release information to a parent with an adult child? I think, again, that would be a well-placed call to Disability Rights Wisconsin. We also have a little gem in our state called the Guardianship Support Center, who would love to know about those kinds of instances. Providers are required to recognize these are legal documents. They don't get to choose which things they want to recognize and not. These are statutorily legal documents, just like a power of attorney and just like a guardianship order, which you would also want them to recognize. So I definitely think we would want to know where those places are that are not recognizing supported decision-making agreements. We certainly recognize there's a lot of need for professional training, but there is not an excuse for deciding you're not recognizing it. It is a legal document. And there's a whole chapter of the state statutes about it, including requiring a supported entities to recognize supported decision-making agreement as an expression of that person's wishes. So Guardianship Support Center, Disability Rights Wisconsin, send me an email. I'd love to know about it, and know that the statutes do require people to honor those agreements. So there is a shout out and of the usefulness of release forms, which I appreciate. To my knowledge, most entities have their own release forms, and I don't have any knowledge of a generic form for institutions that don't have their own form. I think sometimes when we ask and an institution has never had to have their own form, we can, a lot of them are willing to create that for themselves. There's certainly a lot of models out there, but there's not in the same way that we have a generic form that can be tailored for supported decision-making agreements or powers of attorney. I'm unaware of a generic release form. Why bother with the form? If we lived in a perfect world where if a person with a disability asked for help, or an older adult, for somebody to sit in on discussions, I would agree with you that maybe we wouldn't need supported decision-making forms. But I think the reality is the last several questions have shown that just because a person with a disability says they want somebody to attend a meeting or provide a certain kind of help, that isn't necessarily honored. I agree with you. Ableism means that these forms are needed and necessary because people with disabilities kind of have to prove that they have their rights to make their own decisions oftentimes. It isn't fair, but this is one tool for people to assert that they're the decider. And it is a way to legally recognize that another individual is there for a reason, right? Yes, if you have an individual with Alzheimer's and a vision issue, you could absolutely use supported decision-making agreements, and you can do that as an alternative to guardianship. And as long as it works for you, then you can continue using supported decision-making agreements. Think of these tools as not a continuum quite, but you can always apply and petition for guardianship. If something isn't working, or somebody needs a lot more support, or there's been a decline, you can always petition a court for guardianship. You can't undo it once you've gotten the guardianship very easily, but there's nothing saying you have to do it right away. The most restrictive option doesn't need to be your first option, because you absolutely can use all of these other tools, and for in a lot of cases, for an awfully long time, and you still have the option at the end of the day for guardianship if that becomes necessary. How do you know if SDM is okay, or when they should consider a guardian? I kind of feel like that's a more individualized question. I think that to the degree that people are generally safer and happier having control over their lives, and being able to have support, guardianship is always supposed to be the last resort when nothing else is appropriate. So I guess I would kind of generically answer this, that, you know, guardianship should be used when it is very clear that this person has a limited capacity to make a certain kind of decision that is absolutely unlikely to ever change. And for most young people with IDD, that probably is not always the case. It might be in some circumstances, but I think that if you are thinking about, you know, people gaining experience, people making their own decisions, people getting better at that, that you probably can try and use some other tools before deciding that guardianship is the only option for you. I also think that there is a tendency to believe that protection means preventing you know, any kind of decision that you or I might not make, or might not like, and that is a frame that I think it's easy for people to justify, that's what they're doing, when really a lot of times we're projecting our own fears of what might happen, or a decision that we fear could happen, as opposed to allowing people the freedom to learn and make their own decisions, even if they are things that we wouldn't necessarily do at this moment in time. Conservatorship, does this transfer the decision-making authority to the conservator? And yes, it does. So the difference here is the individual volunteers, goes to the court themselves, volunteers, and says, I need help managing my finances, and here is the person I want to help me. I would like Ashley to be my conservator. And the court will say, okay, and they'll appoint Ashley the conservator, and then Ashley is making those decisions on behalf of the person. They voluntarily have, you know, asked the court to do this, and they've chosen the person, but the person that's appointed the conservator has that role, which is functionally very similar to the guardian of the state. Certainly, sometimes people will need to sign release forms, even if they have a supported decision-making agreement. Supported decision-making is more comprehensive than a release form, You may be authorized to get information to help that person understand it, to help their options, to help communicate. Some entities, will have you sign a release form. In addition, we've just heard about entities that don't even have release forms. So it's a legal formal document that is more comprehensive than a release form is. And that doesn't mean that even having a supported decision-making agreement, you might not have to sign another release form. Release forms are really about protecting the entity that's releasing the information. It might be your information, but they want to make sure that you've agreed to let that information out. So, access to it, can be accomplished through a release form, but we should be clear that a release form is about the entity releasing the information. A supported decision-making agreement is really about the person defining what kind of help they need and who's giving it and how, and what kind of access to their information, which may or may not, require a release form. I will have to get back to you. I have not read the conservatorship section of the statutes in some time. So I will have to get back to you on what if and what the required inventory and accounting reporting is for a conservator. If you move to another state, do you have to establish and petition again in a new state? I think this is related to guardianship. There are some universal recognitions of guardianships. You will likely, I don't think you will have to petition in another state to get a guardianship, although if you will have to know what that state's laws are. There is quite a bit of variety among states in terms of what the requirements for guardians are and expectations are for them, and even decision-making authority, so that it behooves you to know that if you are moving to another state. It is a problem that we don't actually have an easy way for states to exchange information about whose guardian and is whom and what the terms of the order are. You should expect that if you move to a new state, you will probably need to take your guardianship order with you and make some inquiries and make sure that every place that you're interacting with has a copy of that order, just as you would for any of your documents. If you have a power of attorney or a supported decision-making agreement, keep a list of where you have left those documents, so you know where you have to go if you need to update things later. Corporate guardians are typically paid for by the ward. Well, the ward's estate can be used to pay a corporate guardian. The courts are always in charge of overseeing whether all guardians, so corporate or not, if there is a guardian that has a guardian of estate powers, there are required inventories and accountings, and some counties actually have even more restrictive policies that require a guardian to have approval before they can spend a certain amount of money, and that can vary by county. I will tell you very nicely that while the courts have a lot of oversight authority, they also don't necessarily do a lot of investigating unless something egregious comes to their attention. So if you have a concern that there was overpayment, definitely you could report that to the court. Yes, you could report that to Adult Protective Services. Adult Protective Services does cover cases of financial exploitation and abuse. And the court does have the ability to to question and sanction or appoint a different guardian if there is something that is going on that should not be. Often they will not know about it unless somebody brings it to their attention, because they have so many people who are under these guardianships that they cannot proactively do the amount of oversight that I think would make more people comfortable. I do not have a list of all attorneys by county. Can a supported decision maker request personal information, health insurance status on their person's behalf? Yes, I believe that that would fall within accessing information. How are SDM agreements used? Yes, you could take it to the bank, the dentist, the doctor, always have the person carry it. I think those are all great ideas. Again, whether you have a guardianship order or a power of attorney or a supported decision-making agreement, I think it's always a great idea to have a list of where have I left these documents, so that if I need to update them, I know where to go. And you're absolutely right. Every place you interact with should have a copy of your documents, so that that everybody knows, here's who's supposed to be here. There's permission for me to be here, and here's the role I'm filling. I think that's just good administrative practice. I'm sure you can find other places that you might want to leave an agreement as well. I will take this question offline, because it is a question that we get, and there is not a perfect solution either in guardianship or supported decision making at this moment in time for people who have intermittent episodic conditions. So I can, if you would like to email me this question, I can provide some additional information for you. We have quite a few other things and a little bit of time. Phil, how I want to honor the rest of the panel, so let me know when would be a good time to stop.
Sure. Well, Tammy is going to have to leave for a 3 o'clock appointment, and we also have Ashley who will have to leave at that time too. How about another 10 minutes of questions? Is that good for you, Tammy?
I actually have to leave at 2:45, Phil.
Okay. All right. Another 5 minutes of questions?
I will get through as quickly as possible.
Okay. Some of these are repeats, so I think you've answered some of the questions already.
Okay.
But we will share, the PowerPoints and the videos afterwards with everybody here. So.
Yes, I'm scanning through to see if there are other things here. Yes, you can petition the court to end your guardianship. There is a process in state law. We've covered that. One of the reasons guardianships are hard to change is that you have to pay all of the court costs if you are the petitioner, or if you are the ward who is petitioning to get your rights back. And that can be a huge barrier, especially for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities who often are living with restricted income and asset limits, especially if they need support in their homes that can only be gotten through Medicaid funded programs that have income and asset limits to be eligible. Again, I would call Disability Rights Wisconsin on that. There are some provisions for people who are indigent, is the word, do not have the money to access the court. And I am not an expert in that, but I do know folks that I could ask that could perhaps provide some insight on how do you access the court to restore your rights if you do not have funding to provide to pay the court costs. I'm not sure what a partial guardianship means here, except that we do have limited guardianship, which means that some, but not all of the person's civil rights have been removed. You know, again, the guardian is you know, the idea is not to have the guardian making all the decisions or to be butting heads with the individual, right? So the guardian has a responsibility to make sure that they are honoring to the degree that they can the person's preferences. The guardianship order should be very clear about which decisions the person still has the ability to make their own decisions about, and which decisions the guardian is responsible for making. And if you are the guardian and you are not responsible for making that decision because the person has the right to make their own decision in that area, then the person has the right to make that decision in that area. And the guardian doesn't have veto authority over decisions that the person can legally be allowed to make.
Does this seem like a good place to stop,
I
Tammy?
think so, because we have so many more questions. And perhaps what we can do is go through some of these questions, and we can perhaps put together some generic answers and send that out after the fact as well. How's that sound, Phil?
That sounds perfect, I think.
Okay.
So thank you, Tammy, for all of the information. And like I said, we will continue to provide these resources to people on our website, and you know, to give us a call anytime they have a question specific to them. This is now the time that we would take a natural break. However, because of time, I am going to just quickly introduce you to Ashley Matthey, and then we'll take a quick little break, and you guys, everybody can stretch and get some quick fresh air. So let me share my screen with everybody. Can everybody see my screen? Okay. All right. So Ashley and several of the other self-advocates that are on this call today are part of a the Center for Youth Voice, Youth Choice grant that BPDD has been working on for the last almost 4 years now. It's a 5-year grant, multi-state grant. Wisconsin was one of the first of 3 states that were entered into the grant, and then there's been 8 more that have come on since then. And I just want to introduce first Ashley. Ashley, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Ashley. I'm a self-advocate with autism. I'm also the Board for People with Developmental Disabilities chair, and I'm on several other boards. So that's just what I'm going to talk about today.
Great. So Ashley, as Ashley mentioned, she is a mentor in the program, and she has helped our other self-advocates learn some leadership skills and practice their presentations. And so she's been a great support to all of us on the project. Ashley is under guardianship. Ashley turned 18 prior to a supported decision-making agreement law. So this option was not available to her and her family when she turned 18. So Ashley's going to just share a little bit about what it's like to be under guardianship. Ashley, do you want to share your story?
Yeah, in 2015, I graduated. And one day I was at a dance, and they went up to my mom, and a whole bunch of boys were after me, and someone had told her to get guardianship. At this moment, I was on my first job having sensory issues and anxiety issues with my autism. So I just kind of just went along with it and signed the papers, because we all had to get SSI, guardianship, all of these things. I did not know that guardianship was, you couldn't get married without your parents' consent. You can't shoot a gun without your parents' consent. I did not know all these things, and I neither did my mom. Now my mom is a very supportive mom. She wanted what's best for me, and that was what she was told was guardianship. Now I'm 28 years old. I've made bad and good decisions, and I fully think that I should be off of guardianship, but it actually is a long process if my mom would go to the court. So if I have anything to tell you, if you're listening, parents, please do not get guardianship. We're gonna make bad and good decisions like anyone else. It's not going to stop us from doing it. So please don't get guardianship, because it just makes people boss you around more and stuff like that. And my mom does use supported decision making principles. Like, she does ask me where I want to go, or if I have anxieties, she says, okay, we'll go to a less stimulating place. And I do have to always have my food separated. So she does use supported decision making, but does it feel like I feel like I'm making better choices than some people who don't have disabilities, and I'm under guardianship. So please, everybody's gonna make better and good decisions in life. Do not put them on guardianship. Do not have them have the thing that I have to deal with.
Right. And as Ashley pointed out, and Tammy as well, is that, guardianship is the most restrictive measure, and there are also so many alternatives to that before you get to that point. So we do encourage people to try some other things, and, to understand too that guardianship simply just doesn't protect people the way that often parents want to protect their young adults. And so there's always this misunderstanding that a guardianship will protect you from legal consequences or financial consequences. And I think it's really a matter of, Ashley, you talk a lot about dignity of risk.
Absolutely.
And helping somebody to learn how to make decisions and to help them and support them in making those decisions. And to understand, like Ashley mentioned, that most guardianships come out of a want, a love and a fear and a concern that parents have to want to protect their children and adult children, and are very concerned about you never want to see your child feel bad or hurt, or and I think that that's where this is all coming from. Ashley, what do you can you share a story about how you and your mom work out guardianship, or how do you relate?
We just work out guardianships. I talk to her about making more choices on my own. For example, sometimes I live with my grandma and I have my own space downstairs, so it's kind of like having a mini apartment. So we're just kind of slowly getting there. It's not there yet, but now that I'm older, I know if all my family members, if it's an unsafe situation, I have to listen to people, because it's dignity of risk is, we're gonna fall a little bit, but if I do an unsafe situation, then that's gonna be bad. So you always have to count on people around you. And yes, I've been dignity of risk. I've had friends that have treated me bad, and then they're no longer my friends. I think we've all had those kind of situations, and we need to understand that that people with disabilities need to have those same situations, so they learn and grow, and then they'll learn from the situation and not do that again and stuff like that. So that's, and even I sometimes, I like to look out for my friends so I can see where my mom likes to and cares for me so much that sometimes she protects me and my sister.
Right. That's always a parent's prerogative to do that. So, and Ashley, as Ashley said, you know, her and her mom have a good relationship, and her mom often will, you know, does ask her questions about what she would like to do, and tells her what's going on, so they have a good working relationship as guardian and ward. So that is also helpful, and supported decision making can certainly, the principles of supported decision making can certainly help in that situation as well. So Ashley, I thank you for joining us. I know you're going to have to leave in a minute. I think this is probably a good time to take a break, and then we'll introduce you to others who are using supported decision making. So let's take a 10-minute break and be back at how about 2:55?
All right, Phil, can you put my email address in the chat?
Sure, I can do that.
All right, thank you all. Hope you enjoy the rest of this meeting.
Thank you, Ashley. Okay, we'll give people another second. I hope you got a chance to run outside and enjoy some of that beautiful weather that we're having. At least we are in Madison. Hopefully you're having it where you are as well. I'm going to share my screen again, and just a reminder, if you have questions, to put them in the Q&A, and at the end of the presentation, we will answer as many questions as we can. Again, this webinar is recorded, and the materials and the recording will be available afterwards. We will send that out. And you will also have a survey to fill out when you leave the webinar, and you will have CEU's information sent to you within about a week or so. So just wanted to remind everybody. And then, so we're going to get started again, and again, talk to some of the folks that actually use supported decision making. So Jenny, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Jenny, and I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, but I live in Ozark County, and I joined supported decision making in March 2021, so it's been about 2 years. Actually, 3, sorry. It's been
Almost
a long time.
4.
4 years?
Almost.
Wow, that's a long time.
It is.
4 years is very long.
Okay, thank
Almost
you.
5 and we're done.
Yep. Junior is not able to join us today. He had some school things come up that he couldn't miss. And so in his place, we have Jordan Anderson. Jordan, can you introduce yourself?
Well, thanks, Phil, and thanks everybody for attending this wonderful webinar. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So as Phil said, my name is Jordan. I am from Auburndale, Wisconsin. I work at the Marshfield Clinic as a patient care assistant 40 hours a week. And I also I am 21 years old, and I use supported decision making, and I'm happy to be here, and I'm just happy to share my story with you all today.
Great. And Jordan is also one of the co-leaders of the project, along with myself and Jenny Newgart from BPDD. Will, would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, hello, my name is William. I'm 20 from Oregon, Wisconsin. And I mean, I'm a youth ambassador. I work at Hy-Vee, and I live at home for right now. And that's all I want to say.
Great, welcome. And Patty Becker, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everybody. I'm Patty Becker. I live at home as well with William. That's how this goes. So I am a parent of William, and also I work at a place called Community Living Alliance. So at where we support people with disabilities and older adults to live in the community. And I'm also a member of the Survival Coalition and hold the seat of co-chair there. Happy to be here today with folks to talk about supported decision making.
Yes, great. Good to have you all here. So let's, oops, here we go. So as Ashley was sharing her story about guardianship, we were talking about some of the things that guardianship just doesn't do for people. Will, what would you like to say about guardianship?
When we talk about guardianship, what do you want to give people advice about?
I want to give people advice of how to be like on your own. And to do things like individually with yourself and not like do it with others, and decide to like, what is it? Be away from your parents and do things on your own that you can try, like going to work on your own, doing things on your own. I mean, it's just, you know, taking care of yourself, being who you are.
Yeah. What do you think about when people assume someone needs a guardian just because they have a disability? What would you say if someone said you have to have one?
Well, then I would say no. Probably.
Okay.
I would say no. I would say no, obviously, but
okay,
that's just something that I am very big about. Like I would say no to people if they were asking me that.
Sure.
And sometimes you just need a little help, right? Well,
yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. So again, you know, we've talked about this before. So let's talk a little bit about what keeps people safe. Okay. So we talked about studies that show that people that that are more self-determined are happier, have better paying jobs, are healthier, and they're more likely to recognize and report abuse. And so we really want to come to this discussion with an understanding of the importance of self-determination and living self-determined lives. And that part of that is making sure that we have as much opportunity to practice problem solving, because problem solving, decision making, so that we can get better at it, right? Has anybody here ever made a mistake? I don't want everybody to raise their hands, but you know, of course, we've all made mistakes, and we've also all have asked for help from people that we trust, that will give us some guidance and give us their opinions, and then we can form our own opinions. So Ashley would say that what keeps her safe is that there's people that she trusts, family and friends, that will give her advice when she asks for it, and help her stay safe in the community. Will, what keeps you safe in the community?
What keeps me safe is being around friends and family, and working with others. My sister, my schoolmates that I used to have, that's like those friends that I was talking about. And I mean, it's just, I like to be safe in the community and just make new friends and all that stuff at work and all that stuff. So that's how I am.
That's great. Okay. What do you think parents worry about when their kids are about to turn 18? Jenny, what do you think your parents worried about when you turned 18?
I think my parents like worry about me making decisions. Sorry. When someone is 18, it's like a big change or transition for them. So many times parents worry about their kids being safe or unsafe, or making bad choices, or getting into trouble, because that's like a teenage thing. And parents get over worried and overprotective sometimes.
Yes.
That's how
Jordan?
parents are.
Yep. Jordan, what about you? What do you think your parents were worried about when you turned 18?
I think they were worried like that I would still have their support. When they first heard about supported decision making, they were a little leery about not having the support to help me. So I think supported decision was the best option for myself, because that way my parents are still able to be there if I ever need them, and they're not limited one way or the other.
That's great. Patty, as a parent, what do you think parents are worried about?
Well, I think, I have two kids, so I'm a parent with two kids, and I worry about similar things for both of them. William is someone who uses supports and services, so mainly those worries are that, he could be vulnerable in a certain situation. As parents, I think we all can, and even as friends of someone who might be an older person, I think it's important when Tammy talks about that, right? As we see people we know start to be challenged by the world around them, it makes it harder to feel safe that they're going to make safe decisions, right? We've had encounters with the world where we know that bad things can happen. So worry about all the things, worry about somebody taking advantage and all of a sudden William's in some legal situation that he can't navigate in on his own, or he might make a choice that his dad and I don't feel would be the best choice. But I think it's also important to recognize, though, that people turn 18, they are still human beings with access to civil rights and all of those things. So we have to balance that. It's hard. I'm going to say that right up front. This is a hard thing. It's not easy. You have to sit in some anxiousness. And that's hard for all of us as humans. But it's important because I'm not always going to be here. So we need to help William have opportunities to form those relationships with folks so that he can feel like he's making safe decisions, and we can feel as parents that we can step back a little bit.
And to just reiterate that, you worry about that with both of your kids, right? It doesn't go away. As a parent, you're worried all the time.
Yeah, we have a thing at our house when someone leaves, I always say, come back to me. Right? And I think that is sort of I want everyone to be safe and fine. And yeah, that's true for both William and his sister, and my parents who are older, all those kinds of things, for sure.
Absolutely. One of the other things that help people stay safe are rituals and routines. Having routines and rituals can keep us grounded. When we surround ourselves with people who know us, they help keep you safe and keep you grounded. Sometimes people use circles of support to gather around a person and get to know the person really well, so that they're ready, so they understand when things may not be quite right with them. You can tell sometimes with your own children. They don't have to tell you that they're feeling sad or they're feeling mad. You kind of know that because you know them. If you're a person that likes to go to a daily coffee shop, and all of a sudden you don't show up, and people in the coffee shop sort of wonder, well, where's Will? Where is he? How come he hasn't come in today? Or he's looking a little ragged today. How are you? And they reach out and see if you're okay, check in with you when you're not having good days. And so that's really be in the community, people around you that aren't just you, and then they can help and support you with, and you have when Okay, and so we also talked about, I think several people mentioned opportunities. And so here are some of our ambassadors and our young folks doing different things out in the community, working, having fun, making crafts and selling jewelry, things like that. And all of those opportunities to be part of your community are really important to be able to live a more self-determined life. And those opportunities will bring you more opportunities to make decisions and to grow as a person. And so this is really an important lesson for everybody to learn. Will, here's some pictures of you in the community. Can you tell us a little bit about some of these pictures?
Some of the pictures are with my family. One is me going to the bank, and my family when I graduated with my sister, and me working at the golf course. I didn't have a picture of me working at a Hy-Vee. It's a grocery store that I work at. I didn't have a picture of that. But me eating, well, making pizza on my own, prom picture, and then going to the house, going to the doctors. So, and then I would say there's other family in there too, but
There's more pictures.
there's more pictures, yes.
Bill, you might be frozen.
Oh, okay.
We can hear you, you're not moving.
Okay. Hey.
I think we might have lost Phil.
Sorry about that, everyone. What I can do is I can share the slides and pick off where she left off, and she will be back shortly. Give me 1 second.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank
I
you,
think you
Jeremy.
lost her too. Yeah, we might have lost her.
Yep, she'll be back.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay.
Well, thanks, Jeremy.
All right. Is everyone able to see the slides okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So
So I have the notes open, Jeremy. I can just, while we wait for Phil, if that's all right, I can take it from here if that works for you. You want to just either
Yep,
do advance?
100%.
All right. So one of the things that the youth ambassadors and supported decision making really focuses on is that idea of having choices is important, right? We talked about how that improves people's mental health and actually can improve your life. It's a part of healthy aging to continue to have control. Jenny, why is it important to you to have choices available to you?
Why is it important?
Yeah.
It's important to have choices because you get to make them, keep them, learn from them, and accept them sometimes, depending on what the choices are and how we make them. Sorry about my dog. I think he's barking.
All right. Dogs participating.
Yes,
Jenny, what
you
kind of
had it.
choices do you make pretty regularly each day?
Yeah, he kind of is. Choices I make, that would be like getting up at 8 or 9 and making my bed and eating breakfast, getting ready for work, although I don't work right now, but I'll be working next week, finally. And I'm trying to see, go to meetings and go to special sports practice games and stuff. So yeah, I get ready for almost everything.
So there's a little bit of it's important, right, to have that right to take those risks and be able to be seen as someone who can do that.
Yeah, it's important to be ready and be responsible too.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it'll never happen.
That's true. Welcome back, Phil.
Yeah.
Thank you. I am so sorry. This is weird, but thank you. We've planned for these interruptions, so thanks for carrying on without me. If you go to the next slide, Jeremy, go to the next one. Just go to the next one. I'm not going to cover things that Tammy has already covered, but I'd like to talk a little bit more about what supported decision-making agreements don't do. And Patty, do you want to talk about that from a parent perspective?
Sure. So when we were talking with, I mean, again, I think the most important thing is it's never too early to start thinking about this for folks, right? You want to always be planning ahead. William is someone who was diagnosed with his disability early on in life, so it's always been a focus of how do we help him find what he needs to live the best life he can with whatever supports and whatever challenges he might have. So it became important to us to look for an option that didn't restrict his rights as a person. And guardianship, as you know, Tammy talked about and Ashley shared, it's really a mechanism that removes civil rights from people. And that felt like it was a step too far for us. And William obviously has expressed that that's not what he was looking for. What it doesn't do, and I think is important, is it doesn't allow us to make decisions for him, right? William still has the opportunity to make those, and that those decisions are his own, and so are the consequences of those decisions. So if he decide, one of the examples we use is that William was looking at where he wanted to work and how much he wanted to work and what did that mean, and what we needed to do is really lay out in small bits, right? This is what that choice will mean, talked about it in ways that he could understand and that he could ask questions about, and really having him understand if you choose option A, you'll have less money to do fun things. If you choose, option B, you'll have more opportunities to move out of the house and do the things that you have in your plan. It also is, I think where this gets tricky in that sort of parent muscle, right, is that when you have somebody who is born with a disability, you are always, as a parent, involved in so much. And the school's going to call and they're going to talk to you. The case manager's going to call and they're going to talk to you, right? What has been important as we've transitioned into supported decision making is for me to remember that I don't get to answer every question, right? And that when someone sends us a document and says, Patty signed this, for me to remind people we're not the guardian. William needs to sign this and be involved in that as well.
Yeah, and that's also something that Ashley talks about often, is that sometimes under guardianship, people tend to talk to the guardian rather than the individual themselves. And that sometimes feels very isolating and doesn't feel like, people are valuing you as a person. And so it's really important to have that role, to maintain that role if you can. Next slide. This is a similar slide that was shared by Tammy, and we're going to talk a little bit about each of those and how some of our self-advocates use them. So next slide, we'll talk a little bit about release of information. And again, this is a simple form that you can create. You can use somebody, an institution might have their own form. That's perfectly fine to use that in addition to your supported decision-making agreement. Sometimes it can be less formal than that. So someone can just say, Will can invite his mom to a meeting with DVR and say, my mom can be here. I give her permission to be in here. Will can go to the doctor's office and say, I would like my mom or dad in the room with me when we talk about certain things. So sometimes that works and that's just fine. And sometimes you need a written agreement. Sometimes legal departments in different institutions will have certain requirements that they ask in a release of information that they feel protects everybody's interests equally. So they require you to use a form. HIPAA form is another example of that. So, Will, do you use a release of information form? Have you used that before?
Yes, I think yes, I have. When I go to the dentist or the doctors, I usually tell them, like you kind of said, I have a form, and then it kind of goes like that, like the way that you kind of said that. That's just the type of stuff that I do. So
yeah, I think
Great.
that we've started just to put into practice that every time William has an appointment with someone who's new, the first question he asks them is there a release of information I need for my mom or my dad or my uncle or supporter? And just being, upfront about it, and they'll hand you one. That's usually been the case in most cases, right? People don't usually question it.
Right. And I think the important part of that too is to have those conversations when you're not in the middle of a crisis, like a medical emergency, or something's going very bad, because that's not the time to stop everything and then try to explain to them what a supported decision making agreement is if they don't already know. So really important with all of the people that will interact with you regarding the supported decision-making agreement, so that they understand if something does happen, or in certain situations, a supporter will be with this individual. So great. Next slide.
Phil, before we go on, I also use what we were talking about in there, and I use it when I go to the dentist and when I go to the bank.
Great. Thank you for adding that, Jordan. Then the next thing on the screen here is representative payees. And this sometimes Social Security Administration requires or requests that you have a representative payee. It is not mandatory, although it seems like almost everybody has one. Except, Jordan, do you have a representative payee?
I don't, I when I used to receive SSI, I was taking care of my own money, but now that I do have a job, I earn too much money to collect SSI. But when I did have SSI, when I did have my SSI, I was my own rep payee.
Great. And did you have to request that?
I believe when we were going through the registration process with my parents, they asked my parents if I was able to manage my money, so that was as simple as a phone call.
Great. Well, that's good to know.
Hey,
Great.
Phil, in the
Yes.
Q&A, there is a question about Social Security, and that sometimes the Social Security representative might ask for a legal guardianship paper. And I just want to respond to that question if we can. The question is,
go ahead. I don't see anything in my Q&A, so
no,
I'm
it's
not
okay.
sure why. I'm not sure why, but we were going to answer questions at the end, but go ahead and
yeah, I think this was one that was left over from Tammy's, and I just wanted to say that obviously Social Security is going to ask about a guardian. If someone doesn't have it and you say no, they're using supported decision making, because supported decision making is a law in Wisconsin, they should be accepting that as well. We, with William, were able to use the release of information in the representative payee process for his application, as well as the ongoing stuff that came during that process of 2 years of applying. Right.
Right. And you're right. And, it is a matter of educating people. We've had this law in place since 2018, not that long ago. I think that there are lots of entities that still are unfamiliar with supported decision-making agreements. And so again, being proactive and making sure that people understand that you have an agreement and this is what it means is really important. So next slide. Won't talk about this too much. Power of attorney, either for healthcare or finances is another option. You can use that in conjunction with supported decision making, and there's multiple ways to set that up. So we'll move on to the next slide. Let's talk about financial support. So there's a plethora of ways that people can get support with their finances. Some of them include things like dual signatures, credit card limits, money managers, things like ABLE accounts or special needs trusts that you get some support in managing. And so there's lots of tools that people can use to help reduce the likelihood of some financial oopses. Jenny, you want to tell us about how you keep your finances under control?
Sure. I keep my finances, like I have a bank account and I'm now on SSDI instead of SSI because they've suspended that. I go to the bank every month and deposit or withdraw money, and I do pay for my rent and everything else with my SSDI money. And my limit for spending is $100. So I try to limit that, otherwise I'll go overboard, and that wouldn't be good. And if I do spend over $100, it's because of medical or travel emergencies and stuff. And that's my everyday limit.
Yeah. So do you get a notice from your bank that says you've reached your limit?
Yep.
Yeah.
They tell me that on the email.
Yeah. So that's one way of helping you like control your spending, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's better that way.
Yes. Will, how about you?
So with my I have a credit card that's called Greenlight, and every time I get usually paid from work, usually I get money from there, going onto my Greenlight, and to make sure I don't go over my limit and spend too much stuff on other people or other things that on my own. So I make sure that there's a limit, and just that's what the Greenlight really does. It just helps you make sure that you don't overpay your check or anything like that. So that's one of the things that I love about Greenlight.
That's very interesting. Patty, can you tell us a little bit more about Greenlight?
Yeah, Greenlight is a debit card that we started using before William was 18 that allowed us to put a certain amount of money on it that he could then spend however he wanted to kind of learn some money skills. And we found that it's just been nice to keep it going. It's a card that, Greenlight's its own entity. It's not part of our bank, but I have access to it through an app, and I can see what he purchases, if he's buying things, where he's buying that. We go through with him and say, how much do you want to put into savings? And you can move it through the app and have opportunities to learn just all in one place, which has been a nice buffer because it puts a boundary and sort of cybercrime, quite honestly, in between William using a card online for something, maybe playing video games, and his actual checking account. It helps to protect that whole account as well, because we can just move the money into it and it doesn't touch our bank.
That's awesome.
It comes out. Yeah.
Great. Next slide, please. So there's also supports that people can get in their own home to help them navigate living on their own. And some of those things include things like meal delivery and remote supports, like there's security services that you can use. There's timers and medication reminders and things like that to help you navigate, just as simple as sort of that ring. Everybody's familiar with the Ring doorbell, where you can actually see, who is at the door instead of opening the door, can keep somebody somewhat safe. And of course, cell phones are also part of that. Will, do you use any of these services?
Yes, I use my own yes, I use my own credit card.
What about at home? Do
At-
you ever do this?
Yes, sorry. I make my own meals. Well, I like give it delivered to my house on my own. And I mean, my family can see when I'm doing stuff, like when I'm buying it. And I mean, it's a good way to like learn on your own how to like get meals delivered to you, but at the same time make sure that it's not that much money that you're spending.
What about
Right.
like any other technology you use here at home just
Cell
for
phone.
reminders?
Cell phones, Alexa, like to make sure that you know what you're doing throughout the day. Timers if you fell asleep. All those sorts of all those sorts of kind of things.
Yeah, great. Hey, Jordan, do you have some thoughts on this? I know you
Yeah.
use some things.
Yeah, I use a lot of different things, but another cool feature because I live with my parents, but if I want to stay at home by myself for an hour or a couple hours, they have cameras, that they bring inside so they can watch me. And obviously, if I have my iPad in my hand, I can text them. If I need them, but if something happens, I can just go up to the camera and then it it has to be on, of course, but then I just tell them like what's going on, and then for I use a lot of natural supports, so it's but that one was I wanted to bring up. And then for my I'm just gonna go banking back a little bit. For my banking, I use I have a savings account, and then I also have a debit card, but I also manage that pretty well. And that's all I wanted to pretty much bring up. I just wanted to bring up that camera story.
Yeah, do you have like automatic door openers at all?
Yeah, I have an automatic door opener that's in my house, and then one that's outside my house in case I need to get inside my house and my parents aren't there to really open the door for me. So thank you for bringing that up because I kind of forgot about that. I knew I had a lot of natural supports that I use.
Yeah, great. Next slide. That kind of brings us into the discussion about technology. We live in a world right now that has so much technology that we really don't even know how to use all of it, right? So you have cell phones that you can take with you that can track you, that can track your phone, that can show you a map on how to get to where you need to get to. Meals, like Will said, but there's also meal planning apps, and there's also meal planning services where you can get food delivered. You can set your menu for the week and get it delivered, and you can make your own food, but you still, there's a grocer that will deliver those items to your doorstep. There's things like exercising, there's things to keep your schedule and calendars and reminders and all sorts of things that we can use on our app, that on our phone, that will help us be safer and keep being able to manage all the things that we have to manage, medication and work and fun and all sorts of things. So this is really this is a great time to be alive and to have the technology and resources available to us to be able to do so many things. And I know that, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't want to interrupt, but I like to say that I use Google Calendar a lot, and that's it really helps me because it kind of reminds me that because I'm a busy guy and I have a lot of different meetings throughout the day, or just to keep me straight. So I like to use Google Calendar.
Yeah, and I have to say, with Jordan and Will and Jenny and all the other ambassadors, if I ever had a tech question, I would go to them and have them help me figure it out on my phone, because they're so much better and it's so much more intuitive to them than it is to me. So yeah, so Will, do you want to talk a little bit about your supported employment?
So I used to have DVR, and to this day I don't have a DVR anymore. Like someone that helped me with the DVR, I didn't like that, so I decided to leave that. And then I decided to go to an organization that was Achievabilities, and they help me when I'm working. And then, when I need that support at work, I get that support. So, and it's a lot of like helping, making stuff, doing stuff on my own, and like doing stuff away from people, and then at the same time you can get help if you need it, if you ask for it.
That's great. Next slide, Jeremy. So let's talk a little bit about community supports. And Will, you've talked about this a little bit already, but I think that there's some, I think there's some slides coming up that I'll ask you about. I think you've just answered that question though for me. So let's go to the next slide. So what does a supporter do? Well, Tammy talked a little bit about that, but let's really find out what supporters do. So Jenny, can you tell us a little bit about what your supporters help you with?
Sure. My supporters are usually my mom, sometimes my dad, and sometimes my neighbor. And usually my mom likes to help me pay for my bills, write my paychecks. She helps me with transportation and meal prep and a few other things sometimes, because that's what moms do.
Right. So Jordan, did you have your hand up?
Mom rules.
Yeah. I have two so my parents are my people that I go to the most, but I know a lot of people in the community, and but my parents are my power of attorney for healthcare and finances, but I rely on them for a lot of issues. But like anybody, like if I have trouble with like something medical, I might go to my aunt, even though she's not my like supporter, just to get many different opinions, and that's how everybody should operate, and that's how I go. Like if I have an issue about, like when I was back at school, I relied on certain teachers to go to and stuff like that. So that's what I would say in this slides. So
you use your aunt informally if you need to, if you think there's a question that you have or a decision that you need to make that she can help you with. You go to her, or in the past you've gone to some of your teachers. Is that what I hear you saying?
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, my parents are my supporters, but I like to seek out other people's opinions too. But ultimately, I make the final decision. So it's really valuable to seek out other people's other people's values and other people's questions too, and that helps me make my decision.
Right. That's great. Let's go on to the next slide. And this, you can't see this the detail of this, but this is what the first page of the supported decision-making agreement looks like. And like Tammy said, you can find it on the DHS website. We also, in our toolkit, include a copy of the agreement that you can use and fill out as well. And you know, you can make as many of these as you need to. So Will, can you tell us a little bit about an agreement that you have with, I think it's Uncle Bill, right?
Yes, it's my uncle.
I'm gonna sit.
Me and my uncle did do one of these before. I wasn't forgotten. Yes. And he usually helps me planning like meetings and like things with this. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but this whole like sheet, I mean, we went through it together and I mean, it was hard, not gonna lie, a little bit. It was hard a little, but I mean, at least I got help from my uncle about it. So I mean, it was fun to do, and it was, you know, I don't know what else to say. It was like,
So are there times so think about like work wise. So like I said before, a lot of times they'll assume that they should call your mom, right?
Yes.
In the beginning. So when we showed up with Uncle Bill, they're like, well, who's this guy?
right.
And you're able to use your supported decision-making agreement to say, this is my Uncle Bill and he's my, he helps me make decisions. And it, again, it is, a lot of times those of us on the service side of the table, I get to sit on that side. We want to document, we want to know who this person is, right? Because we also want to make sure that the person with the disability or older adult isn't being taken advantage of. So really appreciate that William has these agreements that he can really reinforces that relationship and the role that he and Bill have within each other's lives.
Right, that's great. And just a few weeks ago, Uncle Bill came with you to Disability Advocacy Day, right? And helped you out with your legislative visits. That was
Yeah, he
fun.
did.
A good
Great.
day.
Yeah, it really was.
All right, next slide. Will, I'm going to stick with you and ask you to tell us about these folks, these lovely folks that you have here on the screen.
So that's that one by me, or the picture. I don't even, which picture am I?
You can do this one. Who's the one with you and the one other person?
Yeah, it's me and the one other person. That's my
your cousin.
And I call her like an aunt.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but me and my uncle, that's the one with the Wisconsin Badger sweatshirt. Her like said that they were kind of like, what was it? Uncle.
They're godparents.
Godparents.
Okay.
And then that's my mother. In the, what is it?
In the middle.
In the middle. And that one on the side with the braids is my sister. No, Uncle Jeff's in the middle. Uncle Jeff's kind of in the middle.
Okay.
So the one with the one with the beard, the one with the beard, he's Uncle Jeff. That's another uncle. He's should I say married?
Yeah.
Married to Uncle Bill. And then that last guy is my dad. I'm saying last guy.
That last guy.
The last guy is my dad. In the blue. So those are all my supporters.
Those are all people that support you. And I think a good point that you made too is that Uncle Bill and Uncle Jeff are actually not blood related uncles, but they're very close family friends and are, two of your very strong supporters along with your family.
Yeah, I think when I see these pictures, there's also, there's people that aren't on here. I think one of the things I'll just comment is William was someone who used the CLTS waiver and had a pretty strong relationship with his CLTS case manager. And to this day, still reaches out to her. We get together with her every once in a while and you talk with her about decisions you might want to make in the adult world. And it just, the more people, I think, again, this was a parenting strategy for both our kids, the more people, adults they could have in their lives, that they could go to at different times that weren't their parents, helps them to have what they need when they're out in the world.
Right, exactly. Jeremy, you want to go to this next slide and then the following slide, the frequently asked questions. I know we're running out of time and I do want to have some time if there's any questions that people have. So very quick, I'll run through this. These are some questions that we get asked a lot. Is there a cost to create a supported decision-making agreement document? No, there is not. Like we said before, you can download it from the internet and use it. Can you have more than one supporter? Yes, you can have more than one supporter to do multiple things. So you can have one supporter that does finances, one supporter that does healthcare, or you can have two supporters that do both, and you can use them interchangeably. One of the things that we hope happens as people mature and experience the world and experience decision making is that they will learn some skills that they may not organically have at 18. So, practice kind of makes perfect sometimes, and you can learn some of those skills. I've heard people, talk about going to the doctor's office and feeling comfortable to manage just routine checkups and check-ins with the doctors. But if there were medical circumstances that they needed some more information, maybe some decisions about some treatment that they may need, you might want to have your supporter there for that conversation or that appointment. So you can use the supporter when you need them. If you feel like you don't need the supporter for a particular thing, you don't have to use that supporter. Can you change can the agreement be changed? Yes, it can be changed very simply. If a supportive decision-making agreement doesn't work for the person or doesn't work for the supporter, you can void that agreement and make a new one. It is important to keep track of where you are sending or get who has a copy of those agreements so that you can interchange those, right? And say, this agreement is no longer valid. I have a new agreement. I have a new supporter. Maybe somebody, moves out of state and, is no longer available to be your supporter and you need somebody else. So it's very easy to change, and it is an agreement between you and the supporter. And as long as you both agree to it, you're good. You're good. If one of you, if it doesn't work for one or the other of you, you can void the agreement and select a new supporter. Can you use other tools with my supported decision-making agreement? Yes, we've talked about using releases of information, rep payees, power of attorney for healthcare and medical. So you can use those in addition to using the supported decision-making agreement. And last question is, where should I share my agreement? Once you have your agreement signed, again, either having two signatures of two adults or witness your signature or having it notarized, you can then send that document provided to the entities that will be affected, your medical clinic, your doctors, your dentist, your financial institution, all of those folks. You do not need to send this document into the state. Sometimes people send them to me and I return them and say, you don't need to send them to me. They really are for the people that will be interacting with you and your supporter. And again, doing that when there is a non-emergency happening is really important. So next slide. So what do you guys think you want people listening to this conversation to take away from the presentation and from your experiences with supported decision making? Jenny, do you want to go first? What's your message to people? Oh, did we lose Jenny?
Sorry, I'm here. Sorry about that. I got lost for a sec. What was your question?
So what do you want people to take away from this presentation? What do you want to tell people?
Well, I want them to know that they can make their own decisions and make them wisely instead of somebody making decisions for them, because they're grown-up people, they're old enough to do that. And if they do, that means they're responsible.
Jordan, how about you?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of a loaded question, but what I always tell people when I talk to them about supported decision making and when I go on
Yeah.
these seminars is people with disabilities are just like everybody else, and they might make a mistake every now and again. And people that use supported decision making, but supported decision making is an alternative to guardianship, and I just recommend for people to look into look into supported decision making, because it might fit your person just right, and they are more than willing to make mistakes while using supported decision making, because people aren't always 100% right, and I know I'm not always right, and that I'm okay with that, and I'm happy to use supported decision making. And please, I just really want to stress that so much.
Great, thank you, Jordan. Will, what would you like to say to folks?
To never give, or to get it a try. To get, like, I was about to say not give it a try. I was there, to give it a try and see how it goes. I mean, if you don't like it, then at some point maybe you don't like it. Just give it a try. Let's see if it affects you, or if it helps you. Give something a try. I mean, that's just how it works.
That's a great message. Thank you. Patty, as a parent?
Yeah. It's a couple things. I think as a parent, to William's point, it's important to give it a try and also to start making choices early, right? We often, William is someone who can use his words to tell us what he needs and wants, but there are also tells that I know that don't have words, right? I know what William's face looks like when he's kind of telling someone something that's not really true or he's not really sure about. So what that tells me is that we know people who you are close to know you, right? And folks who might not be able to communicate in the same way that William or some of the other ambassadors that we have in Wisconsin can, right? So if people who might use communication devices or kids that you might think have more complex support needs, I don't want anyone to be left out of the opportunity of supported decision making, the conversation around circle of supports and developing people around your child or yourself as you age that know you well enough. Some of us have informal agreements with our friends, right? If this happens to me, don't forget, I still like to drink rum and cokes now and again, or I still want to be able to go to the movies. But though we know, right? There are people in your life who know you well. There are people in your life who know your kid well. And supported decision making really makes it possible in Wisconsin for us to have those folks support us when we need them the most, without giving up the rights that we all so rightly deserve
And cherish. Yes, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you all for sharing your experiences with supported decision making. I think next slide is just a question and answer, and then after that we have some resources. Again, we'll provide these slides and links to the resources. I do see one question in the Q&A regarding the Guardian Support Center and what their role is. So let me just in the chat let's see if I can put it in there. We can send out the link and the phone number for Guardian Support Center. I'm just trying to see if I can. Can I answer in here, Jeremy? I'm not.
Yeah, if you go in Q&A and click type answer, it'll allow you to send that out to everyone.
Okay. Click type answer. I'm not seeing. Okay. Okay. I'm not, I think I've gone too far on that one. Oh, here we go. Okay. Here we go. I put in the help number and the email or website. Guardian Support Center can assist you on answering questions related to adult guardianship and protective placement, and can, you know, guide you with any of those questions that you might have related to guardianship, whether it's something that you are questioning whether or not it's appropriate for your situation, or if there's other specific questions that you have, they can help you. Polly, who manages that hotline, is an attorney, and so she can answer those legal questions for you. Other questions? Oh,
If I could just say, I'm just happy that I got to do this again. And Phil, if you want to put my email in the chat, if anybody wants to reach out and talk to me about supported decision making, or they have a child or another peer, I would be happy to facilitate and answer any questions they have one-on-one.
I will be happy to do that, Jordan. And again, thank you so much all for coming. I think we're just short of 4 o'clock. Again, reminder to fill out the survey, and that your CEUs will be coming along with links and PowerPoint resources and things like that. So that will be coming your way within the next couple of days, and the CEUs within the next 2 weeks. So.
Bill, do you see there's a question from someone about if any of the ambassadors drive, or a question about how transportation affects decisions?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I didn't see that.
It's okay.
I don't know why it's not on my thing.
We're all here together. So William, do you drive?
No, I do not. I use I get help, like I get support by like the team that I go with, like the job coach that I have. They take me to work and they drop me back.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's other decisions I've tried. Tried using a cab, didn't work out the way that it worked.
Do you have friends who drive?
Yes, I got friends that drive. Yes, obviously.
So the reason this question makes me smile, because Ashley Maddie, who you all met, always reminds me that it's possible Patty's going to get in a car with someone and go somewhere, and you have to let that happen, right? So I think Willie, while he doesn't drive now, wants to drive, and you're right that having access to transportation can really open up someone's world. There are different ways to support someone in that. As William mentioned, there's a cab service that uses an app that is designed for people with disabilities, so that helps us support him to, like, where are you going and how's that going to go? And but I think, again, you know, and that's also true with some of the technology that we use with regard to the Find My Phone and things like that. So helps him to have the option to do those things and still get some support while that's happening. And then do you see the other one about best place to find more on conservatorship?
Yes, and I am going to send you the link for the Wisconsin court system that has a little description and has the forms that are available to do that. You could call someone at the Wisconsin Bar Association or an attorney that deals with guardianships and conservatorships to answer those questions as well. So hopefully that will help you.
Someone asked about transportation funding. William has an IRIS budget that he uses to support transportation that he needs. I don't know if Jenny and Jordan have other answers to that question.
Well, I can kind of answer that question quickly, and kind of piggybacking on what Patty mentioned. I use to get to my job. My mom actually works at the same location. She has a different job, so I carpool with her, and I have aids and stuff for my former school that if I want to go places and without my parents, I can rely on friends to take my handicap accessible van. And I also use IRIS too, and they help pay for some of my expenses too for that.
Right. If you have long-term care, you use either a managed care organization or IRIS, you can include transportation on your plan if that's something that fits in within your goals. If you are working or you need transportation to be out in the community or do things, you can talk to your consultant or care manager team to include funding for that on your plan, on your service plan. All right. Well, I think, again, I'd like to just thank you all for hanging in there with us. I hope you can enjoy the rest of your day, and feel free to contact us if you have any additional questions that we can help you with. Tammy and I are available, and I know our ambassadors are always happy to answer questions on their lived experiences with this. So thank you, Patty, for your perspective as well as a parent. That's really, it's really important.
Thanks,
Can
Phil.
I jump in real
welcome.
quick?
Thanks,
So
Yes.
when you close Zoom, you will have a survey pop up, and we are just asking that everyone do that because it's part of our reporting as a state agency, and we want to make sure everyone knows it's anonymous. I know that your names are used in Zoom, but it will not record your answers based on your name or anything like that. So please just take a moment to do that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.